Hi, this is Drew Dinsick of NBC Sports EDGE, joined, of course, by Warren Sharp to talk AFC South. Interesting matchups as we have coming off a season where the AFC South winner was the number one seed, surprisingly, in the AFC, and that was the Tennessee Titans. Market not expecting the Titans to repeat, however, as turnover, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, has tilted the balance of power back towards the Colts. The Colts right now sit at the top of the market, minus 125. Some would argue that is that's not short enough. The Tennessee Titans at plus 175 right now. Jacksonville Jaguars sitting at 7-1, and the Houston Texans 25-1. Let's start with the Texans, and it was an offseason that was really kind of derailed before it really even got going, as their coaching search went sideways on them, and they ended up sticking or elevating their defensive coordinator, Lovie Smith, to the head coaching role. This left people scratching their heads, as the last time we saw Lovie Smith as a head coach, it was at the University of Illinois, and he was not winning football games. However, he now takes over a professional franchise with a quarterback named Davis Mills, who was a third-round draft choice, and not a lot of blue chips on either side of the ball, particularly defense here. Can you give me anything glossy about this Houston Texans team to look out for this season, Warren, with their win total sitting at 4.5? Minus 125 to the under. This is the lowest power rated team in the NFL right now.
I think that they deserve to be the lowest power rated team, but I do think that Davis Mills, when I went back and studied this team last year, I saw more out of him than I was expecting to. You know, last season you see it in glimpses, but you're not really focusing on a guy quarterbacking one of the worst teams in the NFL down in Houston. But when you went back and studied it, he was actually a little bit better than I was expecting, especially when you think about and consider his draft position and the talent that he was working with there. I still think this team is in for a very long season. There's not a lot of optimism for me here. I was really down on this team last year. I don't think that they're going to be any worse than that. I think they could be slightly better this year. I'm not willing to do anything in terms of tying up my money on this team in the futures market.
Yeah, very low total. Seems appropriately priced. Going to be tough for them to underachieve. But all that said, not a team that I'm really willing to stake my flag on, as I would with the next team up in the AFC South, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, people are thinking that this is a bit that I'm doing, that I don't really care for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I'm just being facetious here. But you know, in reality, this is a team that looks an awful lot like last year's breakout Cincinnati Bengals, in that they have a bona fide quarterback who they took first overall 2 years ago. He is entering the second year of his campaign, where we would expect some leap. The team has put offensive weapons around him in the way that they have invested in the offseason. Now, that may not work out long term. They may be in cap jail next year. But for this year, it seems like the intention is to win. And they have now gotten decent investments and the defensive side of the ball with their first two, their two first-round draft picks this year. And they have a man in Doug Peterson who has won a Super Bowl. He defeated Bill Belichick, for crying out loud. And the worst you could say is, at least he's an adult. He seems to be running camp like a grown-up. So in general, I think the spirit and the buzz around the Jaguars is deservedly positive. Their total sits now at 6.5, and you can get plus 105 to the over there. Am I selling you at all on this Jaguars team, or is it still a year away from being a competent franchise?
I like the parallels you drew to Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't know if I see them getting all the way there, but guess what? That's why they're priced the way that they are in the marketplace. You could still have a really good season from this team. And I'm looking at the Jaguars, and I'm seeing that coaching change, and I'm seeing Doug Peterson. Now, we know Doug Peterson ultimately was sent packing from the Philadelphia Eagles, but literally every team that's worked with Carson Wentz since he's won that Super Bowl has desired to move along from him at some point. And so the fact that Doug Peterson didn't overachieve with the last year of Carson Wentz in Philly does not really surprise me whatsoever. I think that Doug Peterson is going to get Trevor Lawrence to throw the football on first down more. Remember, Doug Peterson came from the Andy Reid school. Andy Reid, one of the most pass-heavy coaches in the NFL. Doug Peterson's Eagles were always among the leaders in passing rate up in Philadelphia, except for, I think, 1 year when Carson was coming back from a back injury in the offseason. With Trevor Lawrence, I think this team might increase their first down pass rate. And look back at the numbers last year. He was great passing the football on first down. He struggled on second and third down, but he was really good on first down. So increasing that should help. Also, the one concern I have offensively is I don't love their offensive line. That being said, Doug Peterson has a lot of experience in a couple of years that he was in Philadelphia with a good O-line that then got injured. Sometimes it was before the season started. Sometimes it was during the season, juggling lots of linemen there and trying to execute an offense with below average support at times along that offensive line. So I think that this team is going to be a lot better than they were last season. And I do think that there's reason for some optimism in the futures market on the Jaguars of 2022.
Yeah. That sounds like a fair case. And, I'm reaching, honestly, but I got some long shot tickets, and, everyone needs a long shot this time of year. A team that I have not heard any positive buzz about and has taken me a long time to come around on exactly what's going on is our next team, the Tennessee Titans. This is, it was a shocker that they got the 1 seed last year, frankly. And I think the way that they handled their offseason, where they effectively let some of their more important pieces, namely A.J. Brown and some key offensive linemen, walk out the door, is telling you a lot about how they see their potential 2022 campaign playing out. This feels like a quiet tank to me. The defense has some absolute superstars, particularly up the middle, as you look at both Kevin Byard and Jeffrey Simmons as potential breakout defensive player of the year candidates. But ultimately, this Tennessee Titans team is getting wins on the back of their defense, not their offense this year. And the questions swirling around how much more Derrick Henry has left in the tank, I think, are fair. Their win total right now is 9.5. Under is juicy at -140. But when you hold this up to other 9.5 win teams that we've talked about, like the Ravens and the Bengals, I'm just not seeing them anywhere in the discussion. Where do you fall on the Tennessee Titans for this season?
The problem with the Titans is we haven't really gotten the best read on this team. I think like the sharper betting marketplace has underestimated what they've been able to do over the last couple of seasons. And every single year, Mike Vrabel is somehow producing a team that is doing well. Now, obviously playing in the AFC South does a lot for them in that situation. But even like the best team in the AFC South, they've dominated the Indianapolis Colts. They've won 4 out of the last 5 games against the Indianapolis Colts. So here's one big concern, Drew. I had to just look back because it came into my brain, and then I wanted to double check it. The number 1 largest cap hit for any player in the NFL this year is Ryan Tannehill. Yeah. His cap hit leads the league, and this is a team that is the most run-heavy team in the NFL. So why do you need a quarterback, especially one with Ryan Tannehill's talents, to lead the league in cap hit? That just is less room to allocate on other players, especially when you aren't even going to pass the ball a lot, especially because you just lost your number 1 wide receiver. I've heard mixed reviews on Treylon Burks, the wide receiver they drafted. At first, it looked like it was going great. Then I was hearing that he was struggling in camp and he wasn't running the right routes and he wasn't picking up on things. So I'm not really sure where we stand there. But the bottom line for me is that I would lean towards the under here. I've done nothing with the Tennessee Titans, though. They always seem to find a way with Mike Vrabel, coach of the year last season. But certainly on paper, this team, like you said, doesn't really match up well or seem to have the same talent level as the other teams in the that threshold of wins. And nor do I think this is an offensive-driven league, right? I don't see this particular offense, being able to stack up against some of those other offenses.
No, and the cap hit, that's the secret, really. They're taking their medicine this year. They're going to cut ties with Tannehill after this season. And if they position themselves to ultimately kick the tires on Malik Willis, see what they got there by the end of this season, I won't be surprised. If they position themselves to draft a young quarterback in next year's draft, which will be quarterback rich, I'm not going to be surprised. A team that also has looked to try to figure out the quarterback position that sits at the top of the market in the AFC South is the Indianapolis Colts. New year, new QB. What else is new? The Matt Ryan experience begins in Indianapolis in earnest this season, and things, expectations, frankly, are high. Win total sitting at 9.5, -155 to the over. And I think you can pretty easily talk yourself into this offense being good enough under the stewardship of Matt Ryan, if he's got anything left in the tank, that this team's going to get some of the wins on what is one of the only easy schedules across all of the AFC. Are you sharing any enthusiasm for Indianapolis, or do you think it's time to pump the brakes a little bit on what this team can accomplish?
No, I love the fact that Matt Ryan is coming in here and upgrading this quarterback position. Carson Wentz, the least accurate quarterback in the NFL over the last 2 years, he is now gone. Matt Ryan, one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the league. I think this is a statistic in passes that were thrown 10 plus yards down the field. Matt Ryan, number 3 in accuracy out of 33 qualifying quarterbacks, and Carson Wentz is number 32 in accuracy. My lone concern for them is this. I know that they're dealing with a couple of injuries, particularly Shaquille Leonard. Darius Leonard changed his name to Shaquille, but Leonard is injured and is going to miss some time to start the season. And we are looking at their opening schedule. They're playing the Houston Texans. They're like an 8.5 point road favorite. Everybody's, of course, going to be coming in on the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts are 0-13 in their last 13 week 1 games. Then you go week 2. This team is taking on, I want to say, the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's the second of 2 straight road games to open up the season. This team hasn't won down in Jacksonville for 6 straight years. Then their third game is their home opener, but that's against the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously a very difficult draw. And then the next 2 games are going to be difficult as well. I believe their 4th game, they're taking on the Tennessee Titans. We mentioned when talking about the Titans that the Titans are 4-1 in the last 5 games against the Colts. And then the Colts have to turn around on a short week road game and travel to play Denver at elevation on a Thursday night road game. That's their first 5 games of the season. It's not going to be easier. It looks on paper, if you just look at who they're playing, easier than when you consider the context of how they're playing these games and where they're playing some of those games. And we know that Frank Reich gets this team on track later on in the season. But in the first 5 weeks of the year, since he's coached the Colts, they've only won 40% of their games. They really turn it on and win like 60+% down the stretch after that point. But they try to figure out a new quarterback every year. He's dealing with a new guy, try to figure out how he's going to fit in. So here's what I'll say on to that, Drew. If the Colts come out strong in those first 5 games in situations I think could be tough and win 3 or 4 of those, then look out for this team to really make a solid run. But that is a point in time where they could get a little bit tripped up compared to what most people would expect out of them.
Man, I think that's a really great point, and it speaks to sort of how you approach the market overall. Because you're right. If they get out to a hot start, which again would be completely uncharacteristic under the Frank regime era, he, for whatever reason, starts slowly. But if they do start hot, this team is looking at a 1 seed. But if they start slow, you're going to have an opportunity to buy low on them to win the AFC South potentially, conditional on either the Titans or the Jaguars surprising to the good. So it is going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. I haven't bet any Colts right now. I am leaning toward with you in the sense that they could potentially drop some of those games, namely week 2 at the Jags and then week 3 versus the Chiefs. So I think the buy point for me is around that week 4 mark against the Tennessee Titans. If we're right about the Titans and the tank is on, that's going to be a nice entry point to get involved with the Colts after the market has downgraded them a touch, because it does feel like they are, quite high in terms of public perception right now. All that said, AFC South, brilliant wrap. Great job by you, Warren. Let's come back and close it up with the hottest division in football, the AFC West. Be sure to check out our NFL on NBC YouTube channel for more of our highlights and all of our breakdowns of the divisions of the NFL from a betting standpoint.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.